Hi everyone, and welcome back to Tech This Out Meow, a channel dedicated to composites, plastics, and gadgets, and making your own gear right at home. So today I want to talk to you guys about a project I've worked on my spare time for the last 2 to 3 years, which has been stab-resistant clothing. So the main idea that I've had behind this was I wanted something that was, lightweight, flexible, and could be stitched into pre-existing clothing like my hoodie, right, or a jacket, and could withstand various blades and piercing weapons, right? But I wanted it to be very lightweight and concealable. I didn't want people to be able to look and see that you're wearing armor, which most stab-resistant armor is quite bulky. And honestly, I've had more failures working on this project than I've had in various other armor projects. And I think part of the reason is the fabric I actually own and use, most of it that I buy, is for ballistics, stopping bullets. And the rating for those are actually different. The weave and the weight of those fabrics, of stab-resistant fabric versus ballistic, is actually different. There is some crossover, obviously, but I don't want to make something that's like 25 layers thick, because then it gets just too bulky. It's like, obviously, if you layer Kevlar that thick, 25 to 30 layers, you'll get something that's stab resistant, but it ends up being very bulky and heavy. I wanted to make it as thin as possible. And so what I did was I took multiple fabrics and multiple resins and kept mixing and matching until I could find something that might actually stop a blade. Well, today what I'm going to show you how to build is the best one I've come up with so far. But I don't believe this project by any means is finished, because while doing this I actually thought of a few other things that I want to try, and a few other things that were kind of a success that I want to play with, and maybe we can get those to work just as well. So let's go over the best of the best, the one that has been the best. It has taken 3 shots from a crossbow that it has a 150-pound draw, right, and numerous stabs from various blade types, right, different sizes and shapes, and nothing really made it through. The tips of some blades kind of started poking through, especially in areas that was worked over, right, quite extensively, because I stabbed in the same area, but nothing blew right through, and I was giving some solid hits with it. So what the plate itself is comprised of is 6 layers of Kevlar laminated with truck bed liner, right? So this is ballistic grade Kevlar with truck bed liner. And then 4 layers of Kevlar laminated with silly putty. I know that sounds crazy, but silly putty is actually a non-Newtonian fluid. That means that when shear force is applied to it, it actually seizes up and becomes hard. That's one reason why you can roll silly putty into a ball, throw it against the ground, and it'll bounce. Yet if you took that same ball and just left it in your hand, you would notice it slowly melting, right? So I took these, put them together, pretty much just gave it time and some pressure, and they stuck really well. Stitched up a small nylon sack for them to sit in, because that's what I figured I would be using for this kind of hoodie. And this is the best one. This, out of all the combination of the various different fabrics and resins that I've made, that's the one that has done the absolute best. So first off, what we're going to do is actually show you the test footage. I want to show you the testing with the crossbow first. Then we're going to go over all the knives. I have a close-up camera so you guys can really see the impact, and I show it pretty well because I know a lot of people wanted to see it after each hit. Then I'm actually going to get into how I made this, and then we'll go with the final thoughts on how I'm going to try to improve this in the future. Because doing this, I've learned a little bit of how to work with this type of resin, and also another idea I have that I think is going to actually be better than this one in the end. So anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, subscribe, suggest new ideas for me, and let's go ahead and get started. that. Alright. Come up to this one. Flip this around. See if you can't see the impact points of the three different. None of them made it to the back. You do feel it. The back of the Kevlar. Feel where they hit. I'm surprised it didn't delaminate at all from such a high impact. That's really cool. Alright, well, let's move on to stabbing it with some knives. Alright, so now we're going to test it against various blades of different size, weight. Right, some hunting knives. This old blade I got, it's still got a real sharp tip. This little guy, right, and an X-Acto blade. And this one right here is by far the worst one to stop so far from the tests I've conducted before. But let's go ahead and get through stabbing out a bunch, and then we will go over how to make it. So start with this big old trail knife, right? There we go. Right, you can actually see the dimple from it, but it did in fact stop it. Let's give it again. Move the clay a bit. Should really form it for it. Okay, alright. Let's move up to this one. That one's better. Still no penetration. You can see here. That one blade still might pass through. I don't know. Let's see. Let's move up to this one. That actually hit right where the arrow hit. That one's got a little bit more closer to penetration, but still has not gone through all the way. Let's try somewhere else with this one. There we go. Still no penetration. Alright. It's getting there though. That was probably the closest one so far. So let's save that one for last. I'll go down to the small one because I already know this blade is by far the hardest to stop. So let's go with this one. Good. Just a little dimple. There we go. That was a little bit better. Nice. Here, see if I can get it in the light. Right? No penetration yet. X-Acto knife should pass right through it because it's so small and sharp. I don't know. Yeah, that had to be. It stopped it, but couldn't keep pushing through. But it did make a very small hole where the tip came through in the back of the clay. Very, very small. So, kind of expected the X-Acto knife to ignore, because I mean it's so small and very sharp. Alright, let's try this guy out. Hey! Really? Alright, let's give it again, real hard. Would you look at that? Nothing. Nothing. No way. Alright. Give it again. This is the one that was the worst through all these tests. This blade right here. Yes. That's what I like to see. Finally, we're getting some good results. All right. Oops. Slid off. Here's that other camera. Maybe I can get a closer up. See if we can't zoom in a little bit. Okay. And this is without the nylon sleeving on it too, so this is just 10 layers of fabric. Nothing, man. Awesome. That's finally a success. Yes. Good hard one. As hard as I can give it. Wait. Did that? Nah. That started to come through a little bit. Not much. Not much at all. Alright. Barely, man. You can see the impacts from them. See if I can. You can see it was a smooth surface. You can see the dimples where the energy is transferring through the fabric, but the blade is not. This one still has penetrated the deepest out of all of them except for the X-Acto blade, but that bottomed out pretty much, and it was just a small little pinhole, right? But that one actually started to come through. And that last really hard slam. Let's give it another real hard one. One more. It's like I'm putting everything I can into it. Let's try it. Still, nothing really. There you go. It's a very small, like just the tip of the blade. Awesome. Awesome, man. You can see the energy around it. Where the impact is, right? You can actually see how it started to distribute the energy. So that is a very nice success, man. Very excited and happy about that. All right, cool. All right, so now we're gonna get into how to make this. First off, I want to mention though, I did add it to the nylon sleeving, which I'll show just real quick clips of that right now, and that really did reduce the back of the tip of the blade coming through. I didn't want the testing footage to go on for another 30-40 minutes, so I just wanted to mention that part, and I really gave it all in the middle there, and it did not have any blowouts out the back. You can see the clay and everything stuck on it, and some little dimples from where the tip of those blades were starting to pass through on the initial testing. But even the addition of just 2 layers of this ballistic nylon really made a difference. So anyways, let's go ahead and get on to how to actually make this and go over the final thoughts of it. Alright? Alright, so now let's talk about the lamination. This was a very simple, straightforward wet up lamination where I used 6 layers of Kevlar that were 5x5 and the bed liner, the do-it-yourself truck bed liner. You can buy it. It's called, I think the name of it is Bed Armor, and it's by the company Dupla Color. I'll show a close-up of the can in the final thoughts. This was from earlier small test plates that I was doing. And honestly, this resin is a dream to work with composite fabrication. It's much easier than some of the other urethane resins I was using, some of the other rubberized polyurethane, and the Plastidip that I tried to use. This was fantastic to use because of how thin it was. It has a grainy texture to it, and it also has Kevlar already in it, and it just completely saturated these 6 levels or layers of Kevlar, just completely saturated them. And at the very end, you'll see here in a moment, I wrapped a board in some cheap plastic wrapping so it wouldn't stick to it, and I would press it. And this worked very well at just making sure all those layers were sandwiched together. And then I put it in my cure box for about a full 24-hour cycle underneath the heat lamp. And then I allowed it to fully, because it says about 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours for a full setup.
and that worked remarkably well. And I mean, you guys have already saw the test footage of that, so I'll show here coming up the pressing with the board, and then we'll get into how to impregnate silly putty into the other 4 layers, because that's a little bit tricky. With silly putty, you actually have to heat up the, oh here, there's the board. Alright, so you can see it pressed down really nice. And with the final one that I tested, I also applied a little bit extra on the top rather than the bottom, because I figured the bottom would be nice to laminate to the silly putty if it was a little bit wetter, or a little bit drier, I should say, less of the urethane. So with the silly putty, this is another early, I mean, you can see my mask before it was finished up there in the corner. That's how long I've been working on this. So this method worked pretty well with a hairdryer, but I have to say, just rolling it out, I used 0.7 ounces of silly putty between the layers, and just rolling it out, laying it on it, trimming it, and putting it in the heat box, my resin cure box, for just a couple of minutes in between each layer, worked better than the hairdryer. That's what I'm trying to say. So, but it's pretty simple and straightforward.
Alright, so there you have it. Pretty simple and straightforward lamination. Like I said, you know, take a board like this, and see, I wrapped it with plastic and just press it. I did it once on layer 3 and then once at the very end, and I also applied a little bit more resin to the outside of this one. This is the 6 layers with the 4 layers of the silly putty backing, right? That's what we ended up testing. You guys saw at the very beginning. When you were watching the build, you saw this little one getting made, because I did this one along with a bunch of other resins, all on a, like, just to test which one worked better. I'll probably put a few clips of those failures just right now so you guys can kind of see the blade just blowing through all the others. I didn't want to show all the test footage because I recorded so much over the last few years working on this stuff, and I mean, I'm very excited and happy that we finally have a flexible, lightweight, you know, panel. This thing weighs let's check the scale real quick. Yeah, less than 0.4. It's 0.392 pounds. Like, that's how light this 5x5 is. So that's awesome. So less than a half a pound for this final thing. That's what I'm talking about. And let's see, what was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, the resin. Here, so you guys can see it. And remember, I used 0.7 ounces of the silly putty in between the last 4 layers of Kevlar, and I heated them up in my cure box. This is something that, if you're familiar with the channel, you can just look at my channel, and I built this thing. It's just an easy, very handy tool for lamination. I also highly recommend pressing and just leaving some weight on the silly putty after you heat it up. You know, like put the Kevlar and with the silly putty in between, and just put some weight on it. It'll help it sink into those layers and really hold those fibers together, which is what you want. So as far as final thoughts, how I could improve this design, I also tried something else, didn't record it at all, but that was the addition of Kydex. Kydex is a plastic that's commonly used in knife sheaths and gun holsters, and that's why it's great for thermoforming. It's a great starter plastic to start working with. And my thought was, even though it is quite flexible, this thin sheet of it, was instead cut it into little scales, right? Do something like Lorica sequentata, I think is how you say it, Lorica sequentata. It's the Roman scale mail. It's one of my favorite armors. So I just started cutting ribbons out of the Kydex and making little scales out of it, right? That would overlap, you know, on the outside of a plate like this, you know, goes across, and it would be underneath. I really like that idea because then you would still have flexibility, but you would have that hard plastic to assist with stopping projectiles. I mean, obviously this worked really well, but you could even potentially reduce the layers even further down on that and make it even more flexible if you went this route. At least that's kind of my mentality behind it. So that's something I'm definitely going to try. I'm also going to try, instead of using this brand, I want to make my own like rubberized polyurethane or urethane resin with other plastics infused into it, much like that is. Because I was looking up exactly, you know, on the back it even tells you that it has, you know, urethane polymer, acrylic polymer, polypropylene. You know, it's like, so it's a combination of a few different plastics. So I want to see if I can, part of the reason why I'm trying to dissolve plastics and solvents is I want to see if I can actually make my own resins, my own, like, you know, that I can impregnate into fabrics. And then, you know, there might be something there I could potentially patent and sell. So that's definitely a direction I'm kind of going on for personal, but I'll probably share quite a bit with you guys. I often do with my projects anyways. So yeah, that would be my final thoughts is remember to press these things, you know, give it a little bit of time with some heat, let it cure up, and, you know, feel free to try this at home. You know, obviously don't stab yourself. Yeah, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. All right, don't be that guy. Don't put it on yourself instead. Don't do it. Get a block of the Romana clay, okay? Type 2 or number 2. All right, guys. So if you like this kind of content, final thing I would like to mention is that I'm starting to update every week. So if you're subscribed to me, you can go to the community page if you have the notifications on, you know, ring the little bell or whatever. It will, it'll notify you, and once a week I'm going to be posting updates on my projects. Because if you watch my last video, I'm trying to hit 10 before March 16th. And I wanted to do that so that way I can easily communicate with you guys rather than just trying to do it in the comment section, so I can read your suggestions better. You know, maybe, you know, I added the crossbow in because someone suggested testing with a crossbow, you know, and that was a brilliant idea. I wouldn't have even thought about it, and one of the reasons why this video is going up a few days late is because I wanted to test this, and it worked great against this. I also want to mention the arrow itself weighs 325 grains and the arrow tip is 100 grain. It's only a field tip. I didn't have any broadheads for this bolt, okay? I know you're probably going to be like, well, why didn't you use a... I didn't have any, alright? And I wasn't going to go pick any up because I really wanted to get this done, but still, this is a 150-pound, you know, draw on it, so it's pretty awesome that it was able to stop even just field tips, because it'll sink deep into wood. I know. It'll sink deep into wood. Alright, so. But yeah, so go to the community page, the little tab. If you are notified of you know, my channel, I will post a weekly thing. Feel free to comment and make suggestions, you know, and of course I'll do polls on like, hey, should I do this project or this project, and I'll let you guys vote on it, that sort of thing. So, alright guys, I'm excited. That's 1 out of 10 down. Let's get it. Later.